Tanya for the 17th of Teves is in Perek Yud Beis, chapter 12. It's on page 34, and the number at the bottom of the page is 52. The Alter Rebbe is explaining the condition of the Beinani, the character of the Beinani, in that the Beinani, although he has the occurrence of unholy thoughts that rise from the heart to the mind, but these are involuntary thoughts. These are thoughts that one can't prevent and for which we are not responsible. But as soon as he recognizes the thought, he rejects it and doesn't allow it even as a thought in the mind. Meaning to say, as a voluntary thought. We are 6 lines from the top. The line begins B'chol Yom. The only time that the Beinani does not experience any unholy thoughts at all, which means that even the animal soul is not active in itself, within itself, and it's not producing unholy feelings, and therefore there are no unholy thoughts, because the unholy thought, which is involuntary, is merely a reflection of what's going on in the heart. Since a person is conscious, he is therefore aware and sensitive to what is going on inside his body, inside his heart, inside his system. This involuntary thought, which is unholy, is merely a reflection of the feelings that are occurring in the heart. When he has an unholy feeling, an attraction or a desire for something that isn't godly, that isn't for the sake of holiness, the mind is aware of that feeling. That's the involuntary thought, but it isn't the real action of thought or the garment of thought in which a person pursues a subject willingly in his mind. During davening, when the Beinani is focused on godliness, then the feelings aren't there at all in the heart, and they don't produce even the involuntary thought. But after davening, the desires return, and then the thought could once again rise from the heart to the mind. Now we'll learn in the text. However, the effects, the lasting effect of the davening on the mind, the effect that it has and leaves even after the davening is over, and also the fear and love of God that every Jew has by nature in the recesses of the heart, they are sufficient to be able to be stronger and to control this evil that is desiring these desires. So although the desire is there, the taiva is there, the Beinani is strong enough to control it. And what does it mean to control it if it's there? He can't prevent it from happening, but he can prevent that the desire or the animal soul that produces the desire should not have the control and the power in the city, meaning in the body. So although the desire is there, it doesn't have the authority, it doesn't have the power to express itself. The desire can't express itself. It can't go from potential to actual. How would it go from potential to actual? By clothing itself in the limbs of the body. In thought, speech, or deed, each one of them demanding the use of a part of the body, the animal soul's desire doesn't have that authority, can't use the body to express itself and its desires, and therefore its desires never go from the potential to the actual. And that is the virtue of the Beinani, that in the powers of the soul itself, in the animal soul, the Beinani can't prevent unholy thoughts, unholy feelings, which will produce involuntary unholy thought. This the Beinani is not responsible for. What he is responsible for is his thought, speech, and deed. And in this, the Beinani is always in the side of holiness, because the godly soul, in the realm of the garments of the soul, has complete dominion over the animal soul. animal soul doesn't have access to the body, not even to the mind alone, lahadher bara, to think of this evil, meaning to think of it willingly. In the Beinani, the animal soul does not have that kind of authority and that kind of control to be able to cause the mind to dwell on this unholy thought willingly. In the Beinani, he will never accept willingly this evil thought that rises of itself, involuntarily, from the heart to the mind, as we said before. Ella, rather, in the Beinani, miyad ba'ali yosei lishom, as soon as the unholy thought rises to the mind, dechehu b'shtei yedayim, he rejects it with both hands. U'masiyach daite miyad sheniske shuhirira. As soon as he recognizes that this is an unholy thought, he removes it from his mind. And he doesn't accept it willingly. Not only not to do it, not to pursue it or not to do it, but even in terms of thought alone, not even to think it willingly. And he certainly will not consider doing it, God forbid. Also in thought, in speech, he will not consider speaking it, because the one who thinks it willingly is called a rasha. And a Beinani is not a rasha even for a moment all his life. So the Beinani is not partly good and partly bad. He is always good. But the good is only in that area, in that realm, in which the Beinani is in control. The thought, speech, and deed. In those areas where the Beinani has no control, there evil can exist. But not that the Beinani is ever bad. He's never a rasha. In these three things that the Alter Rebbe mentions, that a person can sin either in thought or in speech or in deed, there are three separate considerations for each of them, in that a person can allow himself some amount of indiscretion in thought, where he won't allow himself any indiscretion in speech and action. And then there are people who might allow themselves an indiscretion in action, but not in thought and speech. And then there's a person who might allow himself some carelessness in speech, but not in thought or in action. And that is that thought is the most sensitive of the garments, and therefore, being that delicate, it is most severely damaged by any indiscretion. So one person might feel that if he's merely doing something carelessly or saying something carelessly, that's not so terrible. But to corrupt your mind, to corrupt the thought, which is so delicate and needs such care, this he would not allow himself to do. Then there's another person who feels that thought is insubstantial. It's intangible. It really doesn't show up very much if you think a bad thought. But action, this is concrete, this is real, this is tangible. And to actually do something bad, that's the worst thing. So where he may permit himself an indiscretion in thought and in speech, but he will not be careless in his actions. And then a third person might feel that thought is too delicate and too edel a garment to treat carelessly. Action is too serious a thing. It's too concrete, it's too real, and as the Torah itself indicates that for an act there's a punishment, whereas for a thought there is not. So the act is more serious in its consequences than the thought for the outside world. So he'll be very careful with his actions. He'll also be very careful with his thoughts, because in thought he corrupts himself severely. He doesn't want to do that. In action he destroys the world, and he doesn't want to do that. But he feels that in speech it's neither as sensitive as thought nor as devastating as action, and here he might allow himself an indiscretion. So what we have so far is that the Beinoni, although he has ungodly feelings, attractions to ungodly things, he will never pursue that feeling. He will never pursue that thought, not even to the degree of continuing the thought. But rather, as soon as it rises, he rejects it with both hands, and he removes it from his mind. As Alter Rebbe said earlier in this Pevek, it is because the Beinoni's mind controls his heart, and in his mind he's always godly, and the control that the mind has over the heart is that even while the heart desires something, the person is capable of doing the exact opposite. And that's true in all areas of life. And it is particularly true when it comes to holiness, because the holiness has an advantage over the unholiness, like light has an advantage over darkness. So that when an unholy thought occurs to the Beinoni, he does the exact opposite. He pursues holiness even more intensely. This is between man and God. Now the Alter Rebbe says that the same applies also in relationships between one Jew and another on a human level, that here too there can be an impulse that is unholy, a feeling towards another person that is unholy, and because the Beinoni is in control, Meyach Shalat al Halev, he can switch it to the exact opposite of what the impulse or what the emotion demands. The same is true also in matters between people, between man to man, that miyad she'elu mehalev lemeyach, as soon as there arises from the heart to the lev, ezetina v'sina chas v'shalom, any complaint, any resentment, or any hatred to another Jew, or any jealousy or anger, or grudge, v'deimehen, or similar negative feelings towards another person, the Beinoni does not accept them at all in his mind and in his will. He doesn't tolerate them. He offers them no hospitality. On the contrary, because of the influence that the mind has over the heart, in that the mind controls the heart and rules over the heart, he does the exact opposite of what this impulse demands. He treats his friend with kindness, and he shows him a greater amount of affection, to tolerate him to the extreme degree, without getting angry, God forbid. So here too, between man and man, when a person feels a negative impulse, a negative emotion towards another Jew, and this becomes a thought in the mind, because the mind reflects what's going on in the heart, here too the Beinoni does not accept it and does not tolerate it at all, not even to the degree of permitting the thought to linger. And then not only does he reject the suggestion of this impulse, but he actually does the exact opposite. He goes to the opposite extreme to be kinder and more affectionate and more tolerant of the person without getting angry. He also does not treat him unkindly in retaliation, because a person cannot become angry but still take revenge and treat the person as poorly as the person treats him without being angry. And a person can feel justified in doing that. I'm not angry, I'm not screaming, I just won't do him a favor because he won't do me a favor. So this the Beinoni rejects also, and will not take that kind of a revenge. But but does the exact opposite, ligme l'chayavim teves, he does kindness and favors to those who are undeserving, as it says in the Zehar, Lilmed me Yosef imechad, that we should learn from Yosef and his brothers. So in case one might think that this is too mystical and applies only to mystics and to people who are saintly and holy, the Alter Rebbe says that this is a lesson that we derive from the simple story of Yosef and his brothers in the Chumash, which is studied even by a 5-year-old. The lesson there is that Yosef says to his brothers, not only am I not angry at you, but I will do kindness with you, I will take care of you, I will offer you hospitality, and so on. And the explanation behind that, Yosef provides as well when he says, Atem chashaftem l'ra, you intended evil when you sold me into slavery. But Elikim chashava l'tova, but God intended it for the good, which means that everything that a person experiences, every pain, every disappointment, every frustration, is coming not from the person who was the tool or the messenger through which this pain came to the individual, but rather it is coming from God, and the person causing it is merely one of the infinite ways in which God brings things about and causes things to happen. So that in truth, if a person experiences a pain, he can't blame the individual who was the catalyst for that pain, but he has to know that it's coming to him from God, and if it's coming from God, then it is good. So that ultimately, the person who caused the pain was a shliach, a messenger from God, to bring about this pain or this frustration, which was necessary for some divine reason for the person to experience. And the fact that the one who causes the pain has no such godly intention, he's doing it because he is a spiteful or angry and not nice person. But that's not the issue, that's not the problem of the victim. The victim is not concerned with the morality of his unkind neighbor. He's reacting to the pain that he feels. And the pain that he feels is coming to him from God, only through the intermediary of this neighbor. When a person sees it that way, when he recognizes that every pain comes to him from God and not any place else, and this has to be so, otherwise we're attributing independent power to the unkind neighbor, and that borders on idolatry. But by the principle of divine providence, even if the neighbor is very cruel and enjoys inflicting pain, no pain could be inflicted without it being decreed from above. And that's what Yosef says. You intended it for the bad, which is something that you have to deal with. This is your tshuva that you have to do, and so on. But God intended it for the good. So as far as what happened to me, which is coming from God, that was for the good. The fact that you intended bad, that's not a reason for me to be angry at you. It has nothing to do with me. In fact, in spite of yourselves, Yosef says to his brothers, in spite of the fact that your kavanah was a bad kavanah, the fact is that which God had to bring to me came through you, so you were the tool, the instrument through which God provided me with that which I needed, and for that I owe you a gratitude, even though you didn't do it with that awareness. But just for the fact that through you I received what I needed from God, for that I owe you a debt. I owe you a gratitude, and certainly not anger or resentment. In the Hayom Yom for the 17th of Teves, the Rebbe writes that there is a custom that we don't learn on the night of Nittel, on the night going to the 25th of December. And I heard from my father the reason for it is so that we don't add any koyach, we don't add energy to unholiness. One time my father said that those Talmidim, those students in the yeshiva, for whom the 8 hours which the yeshiva schedule called for in the study of Gemara, those 8 hours are so precious to them that they can't refrain from learning on this night, I am not pleased with them. Now this refraining from learning is only until midnight, and after midnight one may learn.